Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. This video is brought to you by First Detachment Nutrition. Battle tested, expert formulated. Use discount code AB10 at checkout for 10% off. All right, folks, Big Paul here today with the crew. I've got Amy, AJ, and Kurt with us. What's going on, guys?
Hey.
What's up, guys? How we doing?
Good. So we're going to dig into a topic today, one that's sort of a touchy one. I really don't hear a lot of people talking about on social media in our spaces, mental health and bodybuilding. And I'm sure you folks get a lot of this stuff, especially if you're coaching people. I get people all the time reaching out to me with mental health problems and how PEDs and some of the things that we do in our lifestyle as bodybuilders can affect mental health. There's some positive aspects of bodybuilding. I've definitely seen bodybuilding help people in many ways. I was talking with the crew beforehand. I've had some people that are recovering addicts that bodybuilding has been a positive outlet for them, but I've also seen some things where people abuse the drugs and cause already existing mental health problems to become worse.
Yeah.
And, you know, we have issues like body dysmorphia. We have issues with choosing the wrong compounds. Guys that sort of spin into this bit of psychosis. I see a lot of it on social media now with dudes that are just raging and angry and so upset all the time. And you can identify them. I see these dudes that have just melted their brains, or maybe they already had some sort of existing mental health problem going on, and then the lifestyle in the PED use maybe exacerbated it. But I figured, you know, we'd get together and just kind of shoot the shit on this one and talk about it and what we've seen and what we can do to avoid this sort of stuff. So what is some stuff that you guys have seen common problems with mental health in the bodybuilding space?
I mean, I was just going to start from a really basic thing. I think, right, the goal with anabolic steroids, the science behind it was they were trying to perfect the anabolic androgenic ratio for performance, right? But unfortunately, when it comes to things like mental health, I think testosterone is probably going to be the best bet for most people because the body knows what to do with it. I think when we started messing with that molecule to make these other drugs, we might have created a monster with a lot of these things, especially depending on the dose. And I see it with, you don't see it as much with DHT derivatives, but you definitely see it with the 19-nors, different directions, Tren, nandrolone. I'm sure check drops too, although we're not across a lot of guys who use check drops. And even with then going back to testosterone, when other parts of that aren't managed, right? If estrogen is high or low, it can cause issues, right? So your mood is affected by a lot of different things, neurotransmitters, hormones, estrogen, progesterone, dopamine, GABA, serotonin, and these hormones all affect all of these things together. And I see the whole gamut from excessive, like from depression to like manic behavior, sexual stuff. But I probably see everything. I don't know. You guys probably get the same stuff, I would guess.
Yeah. I mean, anybody that's been on contest prep or has managed people on contest prep, you'll definitely see it towards the end of contest prep. I mean, you're throwing the kitchen sink at it, especially with the manic behavior. Anybody who's been at the end of contest prep that's bought that living room set or gone out and made a big purchase that you normally
You're just
would
trying
make.
to get that dopamine hit.
I don't know what it is, man. I always buy stuff that I don't normally buy at the end of contest prep. Like I bought closet organizers and shelves for my garage. I'm like, I would never do shit like that normally. You'll see it though too. Like I mean, AJ, you prep a lot of guys. I'm sure you've seen it at the end of prep where you have to talk guys off the ledge all the time. They're just completely irrational and have lost their minds at the end of prep. And it's, you know, estrogen's crushed. You're hungry. Hormones are all out of whack. You're running stuff like Tren and you know, it's just a bad, you know, I'm sure dopamine, GABA, sleep, everything's all screwed up at that point.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest issues too is always being in a state of fight or flight, right? Being in that sympathetic nervous system, and obviously when sleep is all down regulated too, I mean, we're having a whole host of issues. Cortisol is through the roof, and then what people do? What do they do as a band-aid? They just take more stimulants throughout the day. So, I mean, everything's just exacerbated worse, obviously, because what they're doing is whatever they can to get by, right? But if you take somebody that already has higher anxiety and you put them in that state. And like Kurt said, with the 19-nor drugs, which is depleting your GABA, a lot of them will really, really deplete GABA, which is a great supplement to bring in for those issues. But you're getting all these issues that's exacerbated along with systemic inflammatory response in the gut brain axis, right? Because there's a correlation between the two. And obviously the downregulation of thyroid happens also. 20% can happen in the gut as well. So you have all these correlating effects happening, just stacking on top of each other. And I think one of the biggest issues is if you're going into a prep with an already unhealthy mental state, it's going to be that much worse, which is why we see on social media, which is another huge cause of these issues to be exacerbated, because comparison is the biggest thief of joy. So you're constantly comparing yourself to others. You're just in more of a state of a fight or flight. So you can't sleep. You're nervous all the time. You're hungry. You know, the dopaminergic system is wrecked. So dopamine is low. That's why you're searching to buy all these crazy things, and you know you're compulsive in that sense. Or you'll get on social media and film a live of you just crying in the car and slamming your fist, or whatever the case may be. And you'll look back 6 months later when you're fat and happy, and you know you don't understand why you did those things. But there's so much neurological things, and I think that's why it's so cool that we have all of us on here today to get together and talk about this really, really important topic, because it's more prevalent now, I believe, than ever, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, you and I, AJ, have talked about this, and all four of us have probably had it. I've had multiple guys that have had to stop doing bodybuilding competitions because of mental health problems. I have one guy who had to have himself committed for suicidal issues. It's more common, I think, than people talk about. Like, we see it as coaches, but I don't tend to discuss what those guys are doing publicly. I'm not going to name names, but
yeah,
we see that all the time. Right. And I think also bodybuilding attracts a certain type of individual. Like, we're all probably have a little bit of flaw in our personality that drove us to do these sorts of things. Right. And then you magnify that with hunger and drugs. Right. And like you said, and then comparing yourself to other people on Instagram.
I mean, it's a great point, Kurt. Go ahead, Amy. Sorry.
I think the self-image component of mental health is so key as well to discuss, because as you stated, you know, if you go into a prep in a potentially insecure state about your body, whether that be, you know, for men, the like bigorexia, you know, they want to be bigger, whereas with, you see with women wanting to be smaller, and you lose all perspective when you're deep into prep. And having social media that's constantly showing you images of other competitors, of how people look, and you can't see yourself realistically in those moments. And then you're adding all these other stressors, you know, just the systemic stress on your body, the constant workouts, like all those things just really start to mess with your head. So even entering prep in a very stable mental place and having a good body image, you may not come out of it like that. You see that a lot with female competitors, that they forever, even after they stop competing, they never lose that extreme critique of their body. Like it's like ingrained in them at some point because of going through prep.
Body dysmorphia is a fickle friend. It's probably what drives us to get into this in some way to begin with. I mean, I think all of us kind of were compensating for something in some way to get into this. I mean, but at the same time, you'll definitely see it with people. I constantly, one of the things I'll do when I have people that are on fat loss journeys or on contest prep, I just did it with a guy yesterday that was really getting down on himself. I'll take a picture from the beginning of prep to where we're at right now and show them. It's funny how they can't see the week to week progress. They still see that same fat guy in the mirror that started prep. They don't see the guy that's ripped or shredded right now. And it's the same thing, I'm sure, with women. I mean, we're all critical. I'll say this though, AJ, talking to you, like, you convinced me that Tren was not necessary for my prep. And I feel so much better this year. This has been the smoothest prep I've ever done. My sleep has been better. My mental health has been better. Everything has been better because of it.
I think AJ is a really great influence, I think, on a lot of things. He influences me as well with a lot of behavioral things. Like, I ask AJ a lot of questions about how to deal with certain things sometimes. Same with you, Paul. Like, I think I use both of you as like a bouncing point. But AJ kind of showed me too, like, the gear, that it's not needed to be run so high all the time, that we can do it without, right? Because I think we get stuck in that, because we're around it all the time.
Yeah.
and just prevalent. And we get stuck in that, like, well, I could just add this or that.
Like it's a slippery slope. Yeah, it's a slippery slope, even being on the other side. I mean, I haven't competed in over a decade. I never will again, but you always get that inkling. You're like, what if I just, throw this in or try this? And it's kind of like, why? Because at the end of the day, everyone's goal, whether you're competing or you're in a lifestyle that just want to look good, feel good, play hard, whatever the case is, we all want to be basically our most optimal, right? So Paul's body is basically moving forward in a forward progression better than ever because he's sleeping. So, everything is running optimal. It's just amazing that we believe, not us when I say we, but we get into this echo chamber of when you're prepping for a show that you have to use these certain things. And if you go outside of that box, it's just not going to work. And that's just not the case. I mean, it's so individualistic with what you utilize, but how you approach everything it's kind of like saying everybody should be doing the same diet, right? You wouldn't say that. So even from a hormonal standpoint, yes, we do know anecdotally, we know scientifically that testosterone is the base of everything. And then we know the other things that can come into play. But if it's causing a net negative, it's like, why on earth, just because all these other people can do it, why would I do it? Right. So you got to think outside of the box. I mean, I've told people this many times. I mean, I've had guys that never could get in shape, right? These are the pros that never could get in shape from anybody. And we never use Tren. It's like, well, there has to be something there. Now, I'm not, down regulating the positive effects that can happen for somebody, but a lot of people will see that there's a net negative with it. And I can tell you from personal experience, when I competed my last show, I thought it would be a genius to just do as much Tren as I could do, right? 24 years old, right? And I looked actually worse doing that. Number one, I never slept. And I actually was so inflamed that right after finals, after I won the show, I was vomiting blood backstage.
Holy crap.
Because I was in such a heightened state of inflammation and stress that my stomach lining was just absolutely destroyed, right? So we have to approach this, which is why we're getting on here and talking to you guys. I hope the audience at home can really absorb this. It's in the middle of the summer. A lot of people are prepping for shows and they're going through these feelings right now of mental health. And like Amy said, it starts in the beginning. So what is your physique built out of? I can tell you when I started competing, my physique was built out of nothing but insecurity and being told as a young child that I couldn't do something. So my cheap motivation was I'm going to prove everybody wrong. And on that, all I did was exacerbate the anxiety that if I don't prove everybody wrong, I'm a failure. And I think that's what a lot of people are doing.
Yeah. I mean, that was, honestly, when I first got into bodybuilding, that was my primary driver. I wanted to prove people wrong. I mean, the same situation. Now I just do it because I love it, but it's a little bit nutty, but I think this is the most rational I've been about it. I will say this, not having the harsh compounds in and being able to sleep and lower my stress, it's just my body has responded so much better.
Yeah, you definitely have a lot less inflammation than you did previous shows. Yeah.
You can see it. You can see it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm eating more. I'm sleeping better. Everything's, and then there's also something to be said for this is sort of a touchy subject, but pharmaceutical grade gear. A lot of the gear that you get is trash. Mm-hmm. A lot of stuff is trash. And adds to the inflammation.
A lot of heavy metals. Yeah.
Well, just even the oil. So I think people obsess about the carrier oil. It's not so much even the carrier oil, it's the grade of the oil too. Mm-hmm. So like if someone's using, people love to talk about MCT oil. Well, you don't go to ShopRite and buy MCT oil and cook your gear with that. That's junk. Like that's not going to make you feel any better or do anything to the gear. Pharmaceutical companies buy special stuff from Sigma that's made to be injected. It's not for like food grade garbage. There's a big difference in just the quality and the solvents and the amount of solvents and those sorts of things, right? There's a reason why these companies spend a ton of money on research.
Yeah, I don't remember there was a documentary I saw where it went behind the scenes in some UGL and these guys were using food grade oils. And they were using unsanitary beakers and probably reusing stuff without cleaning it. Yep. Hoses that were old, not filtering stuff or not having a pump.
Like these guys are using these cheap, even if they're filtering stuff, they're using cheap filters that are on a syringe and they're drawing it out like this and it's clogging, right? The things are supposed to be run through a pump.
Yeah. I mean, that's,
the apparatus and stuff costs a ton of money. Most guys are not doing this in their bathroom.
yeah. I mean, that's just another thing to consider too. But I mean, some of it is deep rooted, like AJ said. It just comes back from childhood and insecurities. And I do think that some, I don't want to play armchair psychologist here, but you have to be at some point comfortable with yourself and overcome some of that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think people too sometimes seek the struggle on prep because they think it should be really hard.
Mhm.
You see a lot of videos of people who are, lamenting how terrible their prep is on social media. And I think that can sometimes mess with people who are having an easy prep. Like prep shouldn't make you feel like these ways, but it's become somewhat socially acceptable that it should. And then if you're not, I think that then leads to people wanting to push it harder. Like, well, that's maybe why I need to do this, or I need to restrict more here or do more cardio, because they're always looking for that thing that someone else said worked and they just aren't feeling bad enough. And that's something I personally like to try and change in talking to people about competing, that it's a joy to compete. Like it's not something that it should make you feel like you're just struggling for everything. And are there hard days? Yes, but that shouldn't be every day. And if that is every day, then like something is off. That's not the norm. Like that shouldn't be the socially acceptable way to prep, like in the gutter.
Well, I think that there's also a genetic response to being lean, right? Like the four of us probably can genetically get leaner than most people. So we might not suffer as much as some people. I have a couple guys that have more average level of body fat most of the year. And when they get to like 10, like the abs are still not even visible yet, they start to really feel fatigue and stuff. Like their brain is really pulling back on them.
Yeah.
Whereas like we probably don't get that until we're pretty freaking close to a show. So there's something, right? Everybody's body's a little bit different. So it might take more struggle for some guys than others. But that being said, you shouldn't be miserable or feel ill for most of the prep. Like there might be some moments that you don't feel great, but I don't think that should be a consistent feeling across the board. Every time I've ever done that, I look worse.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Like AJ said.
Yeah,
like there are times that I've
something is
really
off.
suffered and you think I have to feel horrible. And then you're flat and you're depleted and you look atrocious and your ankles are swollen. There's like your body's just telling you that that's not the right way to do that.
I did
it
that.
all feels good.
I did that one time where I pushed myself too hard. I think that's another thing, like Amy touched on, but there is definitely this feeling. There's some guys that you need to suffer, that you need to be, and I'm not saying it's hard. I mean, you got to work hard. There's discipline and structure that goes into it, but there's some guys will push themselves literally to the point of death. I've been there.
Or vomiting blood.
Vomiting blood.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell people, it's kind of, I didn't make this up, but you'll hear it, choose your hard, right? We can choose to have the mindset that we have to do this. And it's kind of like no one's forcing you to compete. You get to do this. So you need to wake up grateful that you even have two legs to move and actually go do cardio, rather than saying, oh my gosh, my coach is making me do 45, 60 minutes, whatever the case may be, that I get to do this. So shifting that mindset into adapting a grateful mindset is going to shift everything. You wake up tired, hungry. Now you can either choose hard in terms of being in a negative mindset the rest of the day, or you can choose gratitude and say, I'm grateful that I even get to do this. And remember, guys, this is a short period of time. It's not the rest of your life. And if you're starting out with just negative mindset, or you feel like I have to suffer because everybody else is, again, comparison is the biggest thief of joy. It's going to take the joy out of it. Competing should be fun. There's days that are tough, but if you're not having fun, it's like, why are you doing it? I don't, for the life of me, can never understand why people still do it that don't enjoy it. Like truly enjoy going to the gym, seeing the diet process, seeing the body fat fall off, like where Paul's at right now, literally probably sees his physique change every single day. That's cool, man. That's really cool from a physiological standpoint. That is a lot of fun to actually watch happen. And when you kind of step back and take those moments in, because it's kind of like a wedding day, right? It flies by on show day. It's going to fly by. So if you don't stop and like enjoy the journey, get off of your phone and just kind of enjoy every moment of what you're doing and really meditate on the fact that you get to do it, it is a game changer. But if you are literally glued to your screen 24/7, scrolling, seeing who's doing your show, who you're competing against, what's this guy look like with an ultra filtered picture? Oh man, I'm super behind. Now I'm going to go do 3 hours of cardio. Or you're so food focused and adherency falls out, you go binge, which we can get into that too, because there's a lot of mental aspects with that as well. I mean, you've defeated the purpose of having fun. So have fun. I didn't have fun my last couple of years. I was miserable. I had to force myself to go work out. And until I was about a year or two after competing, the joy of training actually came back. And I was like, wow, this is really fun again. So you got to have fun. You got to enjoy it.
Yeah. I went through that as well. I didn't really start to enjoy lifting until much more recently after I stopped, got away from that. As corny as it sounds, with your being grateful thing, something that always stuck with me, one of the first guys I ever got to help with their fat loss journey years ago, 96 or 97. So probably before half the listeners were even alive. This guy, he was very overweight and we got him in crazy shape in 3 months, crazy shape. This guy worked harder than anyone I've ever seen. And I was just so fascinated because I've never come from a place where I was that. I've been out of shape, but I've never been like that. Yeah. And I asked him once what kept him going. And he said he had a twin brother who dove into a pool when they were younger and broke his neck. He's in a wheelchair. And he said every time he would go home, his brother, and he would complain. He's like, I don't want to do cardio today. I don't want to eat chicken. So his brother would say, I would give anything for the ability to pick up a fork and eat chicken. Yeah. And then always kind of stuck with me that the things we complain about are so silly if you think about it. And we're still, even on prep, especially for Paul, he's eating more than most people in third world countries eat every day. Like, it's not like you're hardly starving. None of us have been that close to death, right?
Yeah, I had a guy.
But like the human body can endure a ton before it goes.
I had a guy recently telling me, he's like, I'm starving. I'm like, bro, you're eating chicken and asparagus 6 times a day, man. You're not starving.
Yeah,
I feel like you're starving. Some people get 1 meal a week. That's, you're not starving. Yeah, I mean, I this year, or go ahead, Amy.
Yeah, it's just such an interesting point about, like you kind of touched on, with the people that you surround yourself with in prep. I think we see this a lot in surgery. When people choose to change something about themselves, they sometimes become shocked at the response of people around them. And the same thing happens in bodybuilding. People will try to drag you down because they are jealous of what you're doing, or they wish they could do it. I see that a lot with people who have a boyfriend or a girlfriend, or even a well-meaning sibling or a parent who's constantly critiquing them and like drawing them. They're bringing them to that negative place. Like, well, you should eat. Like, you look sick. I can't believe you're going to the gym again. Having those people around you is not going to help you in a situation where you're trying so hard, and people around you are definitely not your cheerleader, and they're making it a lot worse. And sometimes you can't get away from that. So I think manages conversations with people and really having open conversations with how people in your life are making you feel, or why you're doing what you're doing, so that it doesn't just keep ticking away at you every single day, that these people are kind of fighting against what you're trying to do for yourself in a positive way with negativity.
Yeah.
Social media.
Boundaries.
Yeah.
Social media is a cesspool for that. I've been I'm more used to it now, but shocked at the amount of people that come out of the woodwork when I'm on contest prep to tell me awful things, like DMing me and stuff like that. I was prepared for it this year, but last year was like my first time dealing with it. It's crazy, man. The negative people that.
You suck, Paul. I mean, that's just the way it is. For no reason at all, right? No reason at all.
Amy probably knows this. Just to show, it's kind of morbid, but Amy's probably aware of this. Just to show how powerful the brain is with your outcome of things. In surgery, like in the ER, if there's 2 people that, like a husband and wife, if they're both in an accident and one doesn't make it through surgery, you don't tell the partner that the other one didn't make it until after. Because they know historically that if you tell someone their wife died under the knife, when they go under the knife, they're not going to live. So that's how strong your brain is. You have no control over that, but you'll die in surgery if you know that your partner died.
The mind is wild.
That's what drives me nuts. When people say these things to you, Paul, or to any of us, it's really disturbing that people play those games.
Well, social media it's just wild. I mean, it reinforces some of this really negative behavior. I try to keep my distance with social media. I'll post, but a lot of times I don't engage. And I think that a lot of times that's people that sit there and look for validation and stuff all day long on social media. It can that in itself can be very dysfunctional. And I worry about it with my kids too. I keep my kids away from social media. Neither one of my kids are on social media.
Good for you, man. Good.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
those are the people who only post pictures of themselves when they were like right before a show, and then they're seeking that constant validation. Like they won't post a picture of themselves in the off season because they can't take the critique, or they're just so afraid of like how they actually look. I mean, that's so disordered, but our culture feeds into it. It praises those things, in those moments. And then people get so used to that constant positive feedback all through prep. And then the reverse happens, and they feel like failure. They feel like people are going to be super critical, or are super critical. Like, oh, you got fat. I mean, it's horrible, the things people will say.
Yeah.
Not realizing that what you were when you were stage lean is not sustainable and is not the goal. But, the average person scrolling through your Instagram feed is like, oh, looked great. Now she's fat. And that's where it ends, but they say that.
Yeah. And the four of us probably stay in better shape year round than most people would stay, right? But none of us are staying in that condition.
No.
Right.
Wouldn't want to
There's a
either.
very big difference between
I wouldn't.
what we would walk around as and what you would compete at.
I was just going to briefly touch on the negativity thing before we moved on, because it's so funny. When I started doing some stuff with Paul and Kurt, putting out free information, free content, like you guys do all the time, which is phenomenal. And everybody should be extremely thankful for that. But some of the comments and one in particular with me and Kurt was, yeah, guys, can you do an episode on, hair growth? And it's like, come on, dude, like, just something like that. Like, first of all, it doesn't affect me whatsoever because my identity is not found in my hairline. But, the fact that somebody took the time to insert a negative comment, but you have to be prepared, because if you're putting yourself out there on social media, especially as a competitor, which is why I always tell people, I encourage my guys, especially the last couple of weeks, stay off of it. Listen, if you do not have obligations with your sponsor, and even if you do, post it and sign off. You literally will be so much better off just staying away from it. It's not going to help you. It's not. I promise you, it won't help you. It's only going to cause a negative effect in multiple ways.
Yeah, I worked with a social media consultant to help get my stuff up and going, and he left me with a wise piece of advice, and he told me to be a creator, not a consumer. And that's
good. It's good.
Yeah, and he said that consumption is where you get into a dangerous spiral. If you sit there scrolling all day long, looking at other people, comparing yourself to other people.
Yes.
I mean, it's the same thing too. Like I just try to stay away from media, period, and focus on improving my life and doing positive things every day. For the most part, I'll watch a little bit of Netflix or something before bed, but for the most part, I stay off of media, period.
Likewise. That's one thing, I do. If you guys follow me, I post on my stories all the time, and I do a gratitude walk every day. Even if it's for 15, 20 minutes, I would encourage every competitor to do that. First of all, you're getting your need up, which is great. So it's two positives happening, but the primary focus is just to see like the sunrise or the birds or nature in general, and just see God's creation, how beautiful it is. And that will start you off with gratitude first and foremost. I mean, just pick a few things and be kind of present in the moment with no phone, and sometimes I take my phone just to get a recording because it's so beautiful, but typically I will leave without it. And it's my time to really just utilize breathing techniques, make sure that I'm in that rest and digest state. I'm keeping everything steady and flowed into, okay, I know what I have to do today, but right now, this is a time to control my heart rate, control my breathing, and just be grateful for what is in front of me. And I think if people implement that, it's going to start not only your day off better, but it's going to shift your mindset, like we said, into a gratitude state. And Kurt just, shared with you guys on the surgery table how important it is for the brain to actually be focused on something positive rather than the worst kind of result possible.
Yeah,
well, you're being gracious when I'm going to bed.
and I think also, like you said, AJ, also like picking your surroundings, or Amy said, I think it's very important to control the people you're around.
Oh yeah,
that was something that I had to. So I mean, I kind of came out of nowhere in the last year. Thanks to Paul, and
Sorry.
I've had to control. No, but I've had to control my environment in a much more extreme, fast way because you're exposed to all sorts of people who are negative or want to bring you down, want to use you for things.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the people that are sitting right here, pretty much, plus a couple more, is about the people that I expose myself to at this point.
Yeah.
Because I just don't want to deal with it.
Yeah, energy vampires are real. They're people that just want to drain you.
Yeah.
And anyone who's ever worked with AJ, if they ever get his voice memos, they're like the highlight of my day.
Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
He's the most uplifting person I think I've ever met.
That's awesome.
And I didn't used to be like that. I'm a living proof of what we're talking about today. So I was once there. I mean, I was once in that, even, maybe suicidal ideologies, back in my competitive days, because all my self-worth was in how I placed, what I look like. And you guys know that I talk about identity all the time. So you can't put your identity in that, because if you do, it's built on sand and not built on a rock. It's going to falter eventually. It's going to come down crashing, because it's not always going to go your way. More times than not, life doesn't. You have these expectations, and it's great to work towards a goal. I love it. It's great to be optimistic. You should be. But at the same time, if all your self-worth and value, like Paul's prepping for a show, but he's got so much more on his plate than just a show. He's got a beautiful family. He's got a thriving business. He's putting out great content for you guys. And I know he wants to win, but if he doesn't, his full identity is not placed on a placing. And therefore, he's going to continue to live his life and continue to thrive. So, all these things saying, I think the coolest thing that we're kind of tapping into is the really mental part of, where's your identity lie? Are you basing it solely off of just competing? And, kind of dig back into your childhood. Why did you start this? And then make sure that you shift your focus into competing for the right reasons, because you enjoy it. And then we can get into all the other cool stuff, supplements, and PEDs, and all that stuff you guys want to get into.
Do you want to talk about what the common offenders are with drugs?
Yeah, let's dig into that. I did want to mention one thing before we move on with this. I mean, you guys briefly talked about it. Kurt, you touched on it, but the people that you surround yourself with, that is critically important. And that's something that I've had to make some hard decisions with over my life. Like, you can care about people, but there's certain people that you have to keep at an arm's length in life. I definitely have learned over the years that there's certain people that are not a net positive in my life, and I had to remove those people to live a fulfilling and satisfying life. And touching on the prep thing, like, this might be my last prep. I don't know, man. So I'm just trying to enjoy the moment. And
good.
One of the big things that I've tried to do as I've gotten older is to stay in the moment, not regret the past, and not worry about the future. Not to say that the future is not important, but to enjoy the moment, be in the moment, and do the best each day, and focus on that given day, because you don't know what's coming in the future. You don't. I could be hip hop bust tomorrow, and that could be it. And I can't change the past.
And that's really what it is, right? Anxiety is based on the fear of the future, the fear of the unknown, right? You're anxious for something that hasn't even happened. You've put something in your mind, and you've created this anxiety and fight or flight, this sympathetic nervous state that you're in, because you've put something in your head that you don't even know what's going to happen. So be present, Paul. I mean, that's awesome, dude. I mean, I think that's, if anything, that's the biggest win that you've got out of this entire experience in this prep in 2024. Is that you're enjoying this probably more than you've ever done it before, which is why your body's firing on all cylinders. Isn't that funny how that works, right?
Yeah, it is funny. I mean, it's something I've tried to practice over the last decade or so. And when you touched on it, AJ, it takes work. This stuff takes work. I mean, there's bad mental habits, that voice in your head that can get in there, that little demon that can hop on your shoulder and talk you out of good things. You have to practice silencing that voice in your head. All right, let's talk about the cool stuff, drugs.
Cool. I was just also going to say, on a funny note, 90% of the things that people get anxious about don't actually occur.
Yeah,
that's true.
Right? We hype all these things up in our brain, these what if scenarios, and they never happen. Right.
Yeah,
and the other thing is, you've survived 100% of them. So even if they did happen, you still made it through anyway.
That's a good point.
I could be slaughtering this, but I think it's called the 90-10 rule. I think it was Stephen Covey that came up with it. I don't know if he was a motivational sort of mindset guy, but he had talked about 10% of what happens in life is out of your control. So it's not even worth worrying about. But 90% is within your control, and you can really take a lot of power over your life if you focus on that 90% and let that 10% go.
Or even just your reaction to things.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's really the only thing you really have any control over is how you react to anything.
Yep. Yeah, it's easy to get down that. So continue on. Let's talk about the fun stuff.
I mean, we started with testosterone, right? I think testosterone in and of itself, I think, is going to be the safest, probably most friendly. We're going to talk about anabolic steroids, not growth hormone. But testosterone can solve problems, right? I mean, it can still cause anxiety. It seems that a lot of the issues that the mental things that we're talking about are not through the classic androgen receptor. I think this is part of the reason why psychology and endocrinology took a long time to kind of line up, because we didn't understand what was actually occurring. We thought for the longest time that all steroids worked through the androgen receptor, and then there was gene transcription, but it doesn't explain why you get these mental things from these drugs. And that's because they work with what we call like the surface receptor that causes an immediate response, similar to a strength response from an oral like halotestin. You get a similar mental response from these drugs as well, or an organ response, your heart rate, right? Your organs have these receptors on them. But I think the common outside of that, outside of obviously, I think the biggest problem with testosterone is probably estrogen mismanagement. It's either too high or too low. And we see tons of that now. That's like the strangest thing that goes on. It's mostly too high. We could probably do a whole another thing on that. But I think outside of that, I find equipoise tends to have some issues. Trenbolone, nandrolone, DECA or MPP.
Those are the
Tren
worst offenders.
Tren seems to be the worst.
Tren is the worst. And Tren, at least for me, Tren has turned over the years into something that I think used to make me angry to something that just causes depression now. Like it's definitely changed the way the chemistry of my brain. It's not something I would ever touch again. It's weird how they change over time, right? Like, I don't know what your experience.
Yeah, I had this complete change with 19 North, both Tren and nandrolone. It caused me severe anxiety when I didn't have that effect before. I don't like with Tren. I don't even get, I don't know how to describe it. I guess like I don't get angry. I get apathetic. Like I just don't give a crap.
Yeah.
Like you could, a puppy could get run over in front of me and I'd just be like, well, okay, whatever, going on about my life. And I'm not like that normally. And then I get this really bad social anxiety and, just this low level anxiety that's there at all times. And I had the same experience with nandrolone recently. Like I never had issues with it. And then over the last 2 years, I would get severe panic attacks and just this weird anxiety. Like I'm not even worried about anything, but just like this like underlying feeling of anxiousness. I don't know where it came from. And I'm not like that normally. And I think you throw that on top of somebody that maybe already has a little bit of mental illness. Steve and I did an interview with Steve. We talked about it, and you'll see the guys on social media, the angry influencers, the guys that are raging all the time. And it's usually the dudes that are running Tren or letting their estrogen go crazy.
They need GABA supplementation. They need GABA. They need magnesium 3 and 8. I made a list out for you guys because I hopped on here last minute. So I kind of wrote down, how do we prevent oxidative stress, which is one of the biggest causes of all these things neurologically, right? And also the gut-brain axis, because a lot of people have intestinal permeability or some form of dysbiosis, which is going to thin your blood-brain barrier to an extent. And 50% of neurodegenerative diseases start with that. So there's a lot of things we can do, right? From, like I said, GABA supplementation, even into cerebral lysin has been taking on a lot of attention lately. It's phenomenal for more BDNF. So that's a really good. Samax, Salank, nasal sprays are really, really good. I mean, we could get into why fish oils, high DHA fish oils are so important. I'm a huge advocate of them. I mean, the majority of people's fats at the end of a contest prep are coming specifically from that. So, I mean, I don't know if you guys want to get into the supplementation aspect of it.
AJ, I don't know if you saw it. One of the new theories on dementia is it's a lack of B6 and B. I don't remember which other B one, but it causes gut permeability. And so this bacteria leaching through the small intestine that's entering the brain and causing this. So like you're saying, it causes all sorts of mental problems.
Yeah, LPS. I'm really bad at stating how to lipopolysaccharides. So it gets into that, and you're getting all this systemic inflammatory responses, right? And the majority of competitors have some form of intestinal permeability. That's just the way it is. When you're eating that much food, when you're taking these type of drugs, especially Tren, is going to really destroy the stomach lining. You're going to get these problems. You're going to get that leaky gut syndrome type deal, right? So you're going to have all these neurological issues going on as well. So there's a lot of things we can do to try to prevent it. If you see yourself taking these 19-OR drugs and it's like, listen, I'm going to prep with them regardless of what these 4 people say, I mean, that's fine. I mean, you definitely can. People have been doing it for years, but I think it's cool if we can give you guys some information on how do we kind of down regulate these side effects to prevent you from going crazy to an extent.
Yeah. Or what are the strategies to not need them, right? Like something that I know that I probably all 4 of us do. I know I can speak to Paul and AJ and myself, at least in the off season, we don't get horribly out of shape. Right. So then you don't need to use something like Tren to rein it in because you didn't get out of shape. Like AJ's famously calls it a progress season instead of off season, right? You're never off. I don't like that term either because you're not on vacation. It's just the focus is a little different. You're trying to make forward progress instead of just peel the fat off, but you can still stay lean. There's no reason for guys to get so out of shape and then have to lose 50 pounds.
I think Paul did that. I think you did that too, Paul, this year, right?
Yeah. I saw him in March and he was in great shape. That was still,
I don't think I ever got more than 15 pounds over my stage weight last year.
And I think, Paul, you're also doing kind of a little bit of intermittent fasting one time a week or so.
Yeah, I was playing with that as well. And that seems to have helped a lot with my gut issues. Just giving my gut a break and pulling things down, and it lowers inflammation like you were talking about. I've had all sorts of gut issues in the past, but that has been much better as well this time around.
Have you in the past preps, have you had to use PPIs to keep acid reflux at bay, or are you using one now?
The only time I throw it in, I just start at the Winstrol and I put a little bit. I'm doing a half dose right now to prevent, because sometimes the orals will give me acid reflux.
You're using a lot less than normal, correct?
Yeah.
There it is. That's a huge issue right there, because we know that you're exacerbating more low stomach acidity. Majority of people have low stomach acid. Not everybody, and then the PPI is going to exacerbate that and make you magnesium deficient, B12 deficient, iron deficient. You're getting more anemic. I mean, all these things. So you guys are seeing it right in live and living color. Paul is having a phenomenal prep because he's doing all these things that are, I guess, outside the box, so to speak, but they're working phenomenally well. So, dude, I think that's why obviously Justin's a genius too with nutrition, but you're just doing everything that you need to do to be your best physically and mentally, and they tie together. They're going to correlate together. Your body's going to move forward when all those things are on point. You're optimal, man. You're optimal.
Yeah, I noticed the Tren will also affect my gut too. When I take Tren, my stomach is just a wreck. So that was another thing. But yeah, I mixed in the intermittent fasting. I've been very careful with my food choices, mixing in probiotic foods. I've been eating fermented foods, and I've kept Greek yogurt in during this prep, doing the sourdough bread, stuff like that. Just things that you wouldn't, sort of some unconventional food choices. And Justin's pretty cool with the foods. I mean, he gives you a lot of flexibility. He just gives me the macros, and I have an approved food list and I choose. I know that's a bit of a wild card because some people can't be trusted with that. I definitely understand why coaches give people an exact diet, but I have been intelligent enough to, I think, pick the right foods, and except for on high days when I eat a lot of candy. I think AJ was like, "What are you doing, man?"
Let me ask you, just out of curiosity, you may say, I don't know what you're going to say, but on those days, the day after the high day, how do you feel mentally? Are you a little foggy, a little slow?
Yeah, a little slow, and I definitely hold water. And then 2 days after is when I look good. 2 days after, really 2 to 3 days after is when it pulls in. But usually I'll follow it up with a low day or even a fast before the high day. And then the way we play the high day out, I know this is kind of off topic, is half of the carbs have to come from rice, basically rice products, and then the other half can be from glucose-based sugars.
Yeah, because I mean, getting down that amount of carbs, try eating oatmeal or sweet potatoes and try to get
Gosh.
1,500 grams of carbs. Not going to happen.
No.
Try to
I mean,
digest that amount of
Yeah,
oatmeal.
yeah.
I don't think anybody would want to live with you during those days either, man.
Oof.
But
Long-
anyways, man, I digress. I know
story
I go
short-
all over the place.
Long story short, my gut has been healthier on
Yeah.
this prep too, which I think has resulted in
Sure.
a better look, and it affects you mentally, your sleep, everything.
Mhm. Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. The sleep component of having a healthy intestinal tract is so key.
Yeah.
From the nutritional therapy side of things, that's always where I start with people, is with digestion, regardless of what they come in complaining about, whether it's hormonal dysregulation or depression. And it is shocking how many people just deal with, especially women who deal with like chronic constipation followed by diarrhea, that they just think that that's the okay way for their body to function. And it just isn't, and getting that working first. And nothing else, no amount of supplementation that you throw at somebody is going to fix things if their gut is not working.
100%.
They're not even going to digest the supplements you give them. Like it's a lost cause until you get that working. And I think, Paul, your sleep, seeing that connection between sleep and gut health is so key too. It all is connected. Who was it? Socrates that said all disease begins in the gut.
Yeah. I just did a podcast
this-
on that and I actually quoted that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Ancient medicine we understood how the body worked, I think, a little bit better when we had to use nature to figure things out, and you add in drugs and other things that people might be taking it from a baseline, and all these things can just make gut health so much worse. But if you don't fix it, you can do anything else and it's just still going to be a problem, especially trying to get hormones back after a prep. People who have severe gut dysbiosis and are trying to regulate their hormones following prep. I mean, it's a real story, especially for women. Hormones a lot of them are synthesized in the gut. So if your gut is just destroyed following prep, you've got to really work on that first. And it's going to help with mental health for sure.
I mean, I have a really quick prime example. When I worked with Mustafa Muhammad in 2022, he had horrible gut health. I mean, living on PPIs and just constantly bloated. And the acid reflux, even with the PPIs, was not regulated. And we dove deep into that food safe allergy test. We really figured out what foods work best, what we need to avoid, optimizing sleep. We correlated it. And it's like, well, there you go. He got in shape. So, it's a huge factor that's really overlooked. Like a lot of guys are really afraid to add in like raw kefir in their contest prep diet. And it's like, why? I mean, you'll go out and eat a Five Guys burger on a cheat meal, but you can't have like 4 ounces of raw kefir.
Drink
You know
the
what I mean?
kombucha.
For proper gut health. It just doesn't make sense, right? Or even to the point where they're so hungry, they're eating a bag of salad or spinach, right?
Mhm.
And they're just loading up on too much fiber, right? Because we can have too much fiber. So not to say too much on the gut, but there is such a huge correlation, like Amy said. You could start with the gut before anything else. I mean, you get labs, you get blood work, you get, you can get a Genova's diagnostic stool sample with zonulin. You can see what's going on there and see exactly what's going on, whether you have SIBO, candida overgrowth. I mean, the majority of competitors have some sort of, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth in some form or fashion. There's something going on with the majority of people, which of course will exacerbate anxiety as well. So you have a lot of anxious people that are hungry, they're bloated at the same time, they can't sleep, they're on 19 Nors, they're on clenbuterol, they're on thyroid, they're on caffeine. I mean, yohimbine is known to really make somebody very anxious too, especially if
That's
they
another
have
thing I removed this year was yohimbine.
Yeah, if they have bipolar symptoms too. I mean, it's horrible. It's horrible. So
Yeah, and with going back to Trenbolone for a second, so Trenbolone, one of the reasons why it is such a fantastic anabolic is because it has a prostaglandin response that causes stem cell proliferation. That prostaglandin response causes heartburn. So it's directly screwing with the gut through the vagus nerve.
Yep.
which is the HPTA, right, Kurt?
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons. So it gets even worse, right? You're in prep and your stomach's already screwed up, and then you destroy. So it's going to push it toward dopamine anyway. And then 90% of the serotonin is in your gut. So when you start to destroy your gut, then you have no serotonin, right? So then your mood is completely flat.
And like Amy said, you could go, oh, well, I'll take 5-HTP, and you're not even going to absorb it. It's not going to work.
Well, I think part of the problem, going back to what was just said previously, is I think that there's just so much misinformation about food. When you're talking about like guys will eat Five Guys burger, but they won't, add probiotics and things to their diet. The stuff we hear, this bro science that goes around about nutrition is out of this world. It's wild. So diarrhea, for instance, like when people ask, well, how much protein can you absorb? You will absorb and use everything you put in your mouth unless you have diarrhea. Diarrhea is the act of not absorbing something. So once you have diarrhea, you're not absorbing anything. That's you can't.
Yeah, dude.
Kurt,
it's crazy, dude. When I put grass-fed bone broth in these meals on these guys' diets, they're like, I don't understand. Why would I eat this? And I explain it to them, and they still don't want to see the benefits from it. It's like, listen, we have to start from a nutritional foundation and actually use foods that work, and not just go chicken and rice because that's the bro way to do it. Now, chicken and rice is phenomenal too, especially when I had my irritable bowel disease and I was diagnosed with ulcerative proctitis, which is a different form of colitis. I had to change my diet in the form of there was no fiber, no vegetables. Everything was white. Everything was bland, kind of like Paul does essentially, because I was in such an inflammatory state to fix it. But once you get, somewhat healthy, okay, how do we maintain that health? And then how do we actually get better? What are we missing from a micronutrient standpoint? Selenium, zinc, iodine, copper, all these are micronutrients. And I'll tell a guy, let's get on selenium and iodine. And they're like, dude, let's just take T3. And I'm like, no, let's just take selenium and iodine first. We're going to cover those bases. And then if we need to get into that kind of pharmacology, we will. So it's kind of a misconstrued, like, let's just throw the kitchen sink of drugs, we'll forget all the rest. And that may work for like a prep or two. But dude, after 5 years or 10 years of this, it's going to be a problem. And you're going to start having kidney issues, gut issues, brain issues. And then you wonder why you just can't get in shape when you prep for shows.
And you see it in those athletes that don't take care of themselves, that just mask with drugs, because they never quite look right. There's always like a look, right? Their skin is always thicker. They never quite get lean enough.
Yep. Yeah, they're definitely, they look sick.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see it. They just look sick. And you can see the wheels fall off. And then that, once again, that'll factor into mental health. Guys start, it's this downward spiral where they start getting upset about it. And then, throwing more drugs at it. And it's just this downward spiral that I've seen guys get into.
Maybe Dexter Jackson and Lavroni, now, be it they had amazing genetics, but maybe they were onto something when they would stop training for a little bit and not eating a bodybuilder diet for 3 or 4 months. Maybe that's why longevity for Dexter was so good.
That's
because he wasn't beating himself into the ground, right?
That's pretty much what I did this year, man. After my show, I came down to just eating 3 to 4 times a day, and then I did intermittent fasting. I ate clean. I'd have 1 or 2 meals a week that were free. And I was just running TRT and some growth hormone for 4 months. And then my body responded well when I went back to pushing. I felt great. It's the best I've ever felt coming into prep.
Kurt, do you want to get back to the PED part, man? I keep interrupting, man. I'm sorry.
No, I think that those are the common offenders. And I think and I'm not going to give away what, necessarily Paul is doing, but I think,
you can talk about mine.
When I was saying, I think, I started with saying don't get horribly out of shape in the off season. I think and then allows you then to not have to use such harsh things, right? Mm-hmm. You don't need such harsh drugs to get big, and you don't need such harsh drugs to diet. So in my mind, the function of Tren is to preserve your muscle mass. Mm-hmm. So for a normal guy, there are other uses for it, but for a normal guy, it's to preserve your muscle mass when you have to diet very extremely, right? Because it's going to hold muscle better than other things. If you're not horribly out of shape, you don't have to diet that hard. Mm-hmm. Right? Yeah. Like you can just reduce your calories by, 500 calories a day. There's nothing extreme. You can tolerate that. You can get by with using a DHT and some test and some growth and still look great, feel good, right? It's when you got to cut your calories by 2,000 calories and do 2 hours of cardio. Mm-hmm. That's something like Tren matters. And that's when you see, and that's, I think, what guys miss. So context is everything. And I think this is where the internet goes wrong is we see these clips of these things or these segments where guys will say things like, I, lack of better words, I called Vigorous Steve out on what he's doing now with his testosterone dose because they think context is everything. He's not explaining that that's not what got him there. He's explaining that he's using now, right? You see like that Wesley Vissers clip that has 14,000 or 15,000 likes on my Instagram page where he talks about using just testosterone to go into a show. He didn't need Tren. He pulled the Tren out because he didn't need it anymore. He was no longer dieting. So it doesn't mean he doesn't use it. It doesn't mean that that's what got him there. It just, you're only seeing a segment of something, right? So you can't judge the whole picture by this little, 3-second clip of something.
Here's a cool anecdote too for you guys. Is I had a competitor, I'm not going to name his name, but he was 2 years ago, he won 2 shows. And in between those 2 shows, there was a 3 or 4 week span where he came over he did a show, it was somewhere in Europe, and then he did a show in America. When he came to America, he had no injectables. So 3 weeks in between shows with no oils, just orals, no GH. Now, mind you, genetics, great, phenomenal. Yes. Just the orals, though, not only did he maintain the muscle mass, obviously insulin sensitivity was higher because, to Kurt's point, he was in shape already. So he didn't have to use all these other accessories, so to speak, right? But what we found out and what we saw is not only did gut health improve, that inflammatory look that he had in the first show was gone by the second show. Mm-hmm. So I was like, man, there's got to be something there. And I'm not telling people to do this. I'm just kind of giving you an anecdote. There's got to be something there with what you guys were talking about in the beginning with, the different oils, the quality of the oils, and then of course, heavy metals being in there. It's causing a systemic inflammatory response without a doubt. So again, you have to look at everything in totality, that everything synergizes together and it cascades. That's why we're talking about the gut-brain axis. And that's why we're talking about how we can kind of fix the side effects from the 19-nor drugs with supplementation. Everything synergizes together. So it was just kind of cool to see, like, because even from a coaching standpoint, I was like, oh man, 3 weeks, dude, I don't know if we're going to be, where we need to be. And it was like the outcome was so much better than even I could have expected. Right. So we have to think what works best for us individualistically as an individual, not based off what everybody else is doing. Mm-hmm. So like what Kurt was saying, context is key on social media and all these videos where people they kind of see it and then they want to regurgitate what everybody else is doing. But it's like, find what works best for you, because what works for, Bob and Mike doesn't mean you need to do it. You got to find out what works for you. Just like I think Paul came into his own now. I think he finally found out what worked best for him.
Yeah. Like Paul and I talk about this stuff clearly on the side, so I'm pretty aware of what he's doing, but it's a totally different strategy because he's in control of this stuff in his shape. So like where he might be using Test, Primo, and Masteron or something more, more mild compounds, I would typically use the harsher ones with guys that come to me late or in horrible shape or aren't following through. Like you give them a diet and they don't really listen to this stuff. Like that's when those tools are needed, right? Someone like Paul who's held it together all year and just made slow and steady progress. And he's just really fine tuning his physique, and it is changing every day and he feels good. He doesn't need all that stuff. Tren would probably make it worse at this point for him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And you're right. Everybody's different. There's, I know 2 of my clients are doing the same thing.
When that's also, again, you swing the other way with those compounds too, right? Like, so now the biggest trend in the world apparently is testosterone, right? Because like 1 or 2 guys, this worked really well for. Again, context, it doesn't mean that's what got them to where they are, but now everyone wants to just run testosterone, thinking that they're going to get the same result as, John Jewett or one of these guys that, is open about this stuff. And again, that's a silly technique, right? That doesn't mean it's not going to work, but it doesn't mean it's the right technique either.
Right.
Right. Like, I don't think any of us as coaches just blindly give recommendations on things like that.
Dexter Jackson was eating Taco Bell 3 weeks out, or Ronnie Coleman eating Masterpiece barbecue sauce. Does that mean we should all do it? I mean, come on, guys. Find out what works for you.
Didn't Chad Nichols ask him once where he was like, what do you eat? He said, chicken. What kind of chicken? Kentucky Fried.
Yeah. That was the story I heard.
Oh, yeah.
He was eating, what did he say? He was spending like 30 grand a year at Denny's, I think it was, or something like that.
The Lee Priest used to eat like that too, right? You got the KFC bucket.
Yeah.
So a cool thing I'll touch on real quick, and I'm gonna let you guys talk because I don't want to take over, but I think a cool thing too that you guys could also implement after shows is kind of brain repair. And I love to use BPC 157, TB 500, and also KPV peptide for gut healing. So there's different forms that you can get those in. I mentioned cerebral lysin as well. phenomenal for brain repair and more BDNF in the system. Hyperbaric chambers, infrared sauna.
I was just going to bring up hyperbaric.
Yeah. These are phenomenal modalities that you can use. And even cold shock therapy is great for someone that suffers with depression, just to release more dopamine throughout the day. So there's a lot of holistic modalities that you can go into post show, and then implementing some intermittent fasting once a week like Paul does, I think actually has a lot of benefit. You're not going to lose muscle. You just won't. I mean, if anything, it's going to give your digestive system somewhat of a rest. And I don't necessarily mean a 24-hour fast, but maybe even 16 hours where you're just kind of relaxing. And probably what you'll notice is you're very sharp and light on your feet, and you're very productive, and you're kind of like, wow, this is a new way to do things. And then you can see that not only do you feel great the next day, but you got a lot of productivity things done the day you were fasting, and inflammation is even lower. So I think that a lot of people focus on, okay, it's after the show, let me get labs pulled, I need to fix my liver, my kidneys, HbA1c, whatever the case may be, but they don't like focus on brain, right? We don't focus on brain gut connection. So I think fixing your gut, fixing your brain, bringing down inflammation. If you want to, Amy, touch on the hyperbaric chamber, a lot of people don't talk about that, but it's a great modality to use.
Well, and the studies on hyperbaric are pretty impressive, especially we use it a lot for people coming out of anesthesia. And the studies have shown people who do hyperbaric sessions following anesthesia have less of the side effects. So you don't have the amnesia that can happen following anesthesia. And just in general, if you think about what that's doing for your body, like you are literally infusing like to the very tips of your fingers and the tips of your toes, your body was just flooded with fresh oxygen. And there is a component of just the relaxation that it gives your vessels and everything being in that highly pressurized state really lets everything kind of flush itself through, helps with inflammation, really beneficial for brain health in general, because there's not a lot of other ways that you can get that ability to just really flood your body with oxygen and that pressure to kind of let everything relax. Like it's I think fundamental for anyone, especially for anti-aging or dealing with any type of neurodegenerative condition. It should be the very first thing you go to.
I agree. And even colon therapy too. A lot of people get weirded out by colonics, but man, if people got more regular colonics too. I mean, Tony Freeman, if anybody, you guys remember him back in the day, Tony Freeman was known for getting colonics probably 3 or 4 times a year. If you look at him now, he's in his late 50s. Guy looks like he's in his 30s. Phenomenal, just great health. So these are just some internal holistic approaches that you could do specifically post-show too, to kind of get that healing process started back up. It's I don't know if anyone's really talking about it, but really, how do we reduce that full oxidative stress within the body? That would be a great thing for a lot of people to implement, I believe.
Dean and I have talked about that with cholesterol too, because I think that's misunderstood. It's not so much the cholesterol that causes heart disease; it's oxidative stress on that cholesterol that's causing the problem, right? So in your whole body, not your brain, everywhere. That's really what affects us the most, right? That's one of the main causes of disease.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cholesterol has forever gotten a bad rap just for being at the scene of the crime. Yeah, it's really what started everything. You see these plaques. Well, the plaques were forming because there was damage to the vessel or the artery, not because the cholesterol was there. The cholesterol came to help, but then, like you said, it gets oxidative. We have issues with the phospholipid bilayer of these cells. They're degraded. They're filled with nasty fried chicken oil. All those things add to it. And then, oh, well, what's the problem? Well, medicine says it's cholesterol. When no, cholesterol was coming to help, but it just ended up clogging up the whole system.
And we talked to AJ before about DHA. So the human brain is largely made of DHA. So, and most Americans are completely deficient in it. So you got to wonder what role that plays in things like depression or any of these manic behaviors, right? And then what is your brain then made of if you're not taking in this fat? Because you're not getting it from your diet.
McDonald's.
Well, I mean, your body will replace that fat with other fat, but that's not what it's supposed to be made of.
Yeah, I love supplementing pregnenolone and DHA. It's just kind of dialing in the right dosage that you need in the timing, whether it be in the morning or at night. But again, these are a lot of modalities that people don't focus on. You know what I mean? Because it can get quite costly. I'm also a huge believer in phospholipids. So phosphatidylcholine is awesome. From Body Bio, they make one of the purest forms too. So just all these things that you're adding in that's a little bit different from your normal liver, kidney, your astragalus. All those things have a part don't get me wrong, but again, like Amy said, if the gut's not healthy, then you're literally just taking in pills, probably putting more stress on your liver more than anything, and not getting any benefit. So yeah, that's great stuff with the cholesterol too, because that's very overlooked, understanding the mechanisms behind it, and then how do you navigate out of that to, get the most benefit.
Yeah, I think another one you see too that's interesting is in the off season, a lot of guys will use insulin, right? Because they think it's needed. If they got leaner and they stayed in better shape, they probably wouldn't need it.
Yeah.
Right. Like you notice during prep, right, Paul, like you actually start to go hypo. You don't need.
I'll go
right,
hypo on my low days, which are
Mm-hmm.
250 grams of carbs or whatever. I'll start going hypo.
Yeah. So it's not like a pancreatic insufficiency thing. It's just people's body fat's just too high to handle.
And I'm a type 1B diabetic, and I go hypo on my low days. So if that tells you anything.
Yeah.
Right,
Well, I was just going to touch on that. And, like Kurt was saying, you have guys that are running insulin pretty much, all year, whether it be, basal insulin with Lantus always being in the background, down to the Nova Rapids, the Humalogs, just constantly. And listen, insulin definitely will have a place and time for certain individuals. But again, if you don't understand the mechanisms and you're not getting your HbA1c, which is the reading over a 3-month span, and then also your postprandial glucose, actually taking a glucometer and seeing where you're at, or you're fasted. A lot of guys don't even need it. They just need to get leaner. They need to do more cardio. They need to up their fiber intake. There's a lot of different things you can do first from a holistic standpoint before you start getting into the pharmacology. And again, it's all about making your body optimal. Listen, God created us in an amazing way that we need sleep, we need to reduce cortisol, and we need a healthy gut to have a good, healthy brain. It's all connected. So if we don't understand those connections and cascades down to the T, it's hard to really fully understand it. And what you'll just do is kind of like what Paul did, or what I used to do, is I would get acid reflux and just PPIs all day long. I mean, like M&Ms, popping them all day. And then when the show's over, you're just this toxic dump that feels horrible. You can't digest anything. You have diarrhea every day, all day, and you're so deficient in iron. You can just see it. You look sick on stage. And in fact, it's so bad that even when you get your color put on, the tanner, your pH is so off that it turns green. So that's another thing a lot of people don't know, is a lot of color, when it seeps into the skin, when you have too much acidity, it will turn green.
I saw a guy at the New York Pro last year that was green.
Yeah.
Yeah. Literally on stage.
Going back to insulin for a second, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but it's something that I'm not really a big fan of unless it's needed. So guys have it backwards. It's not a pancreatic insufficiency thing where insulin is required. It's more of a type 2 diabetic thing where your cells, GLUT4 won't translocate. You can only hold so much glucose. So we're forcing this situation where you're trying to get more glucose into a cell, adding more carrier, although it works, isn't the right solution. The problem is get leaner so your cells aren't so inflamed so you can take on that glucose. And using insulin as a non-diabetic will destroy your pancreas. That's a known medical thing. You can ask any doctor that question. That's the studies that bodybuilders are citing is in diabetic people. It will not preserve your pancreatic function. So you really need to be very careful when you start introducing those things, because you destroy your health.
Crazy stuff. All right, guys, any parting words? I've got to wrap this up.
Just remember that prep is a season. And if you can control your circle, that's going to be the biggest thing. Make sure that you have a supportive people around you. You have an actual good coach who you trust, who's giving you good advice, and kind of shutting out all the nonsense. And that'll really help with everything mental health wise during prep.
Yeah, we chose this, right? You can also stop at any time.
Yeah. One big word of advice I can tell people is never take drugs at the expense of your mental health. It's not worth it, man. You're just not going to get a long-term benefit out of it. If it's making you sick, if it's making you feel bad, don't use it. You don't have to.
I would say that, know where your foundation lies. Don't start competing or stay in competing if you believe that's your identity. You'll get lost in it. And 9 times out of 10, you'll be probably 10 times out of 10, actually, you'll be disappointed. It's going to happen. The identity doesn't lie there. Be present. Like Paul said, you get to do it. Kurt said, you get to do it. You don't have to do it. You get to do it. You can stop at any time. Nobody's forcing you. Be kind to your loved ones. Enjoy them in every season, regardless of if you're hungry. It's just a season, and it will be over before you know it. And enjoy the process. If you don't enjoy bodybuilding and you don't enjoy the process, go find another sport and just lift weights. There's nothing wrong with it. There really isn't. You can still live a phenomenal life. And 9 times out of 10, you'll probably find out that you're a lot more happy. So if you're doing it for the right reasons, bodybuilding can be a phenomenal learning tool in all aspects of your life. Resiliency, work ethic, discipline, and really learning how to understand how deep you can get into something by pushing yourself to a healthy limit to an extent.
Yeah, I do think there are some positives. We didn't really talk about those, but definitely
it's
learning
fun.
how to work hard, discipline, structure, and it is fun. I enjoy it.
And it carries over into life. You learn a lot of lessons that you can apply. There's very few people who can be somewhat successful bodybuilder that can't apply that to business in some way.
I've seen so many bodybuilders transfer those skill sets over to business and be successful in business because they know how to grind. And being successful in business requires grinding.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
All right, folks, I think that's all we got on this one. Thank you for watching. We appreciate each and every one of you. Be kind to yourselves. You only get one shot at this life. Make the most of it.